Chapter 29. After his performance in class, I'd decided it was time to remove any reason for Johintur to associate with me, so I rushed toward my dormitory room after promising to meet up with Shabana in time for our stamina class. The sooner the key was out of my possession, the better, and considering the study in the bowels beneath the academy had been cleared of the tomes and scrolls, there was no harm in returning it. Although I wondered about his assertion Master Welling was the key's owner, and I was tempted to return the key to him myself to test it, I was ready to be done with it. Johin would be in my next class, and the problem would be instantly solved. Who knew? Maybe his stress over the item would teach him not to play tricks on others, but I doubted it. As I crossed through the library, I reviewed the entries I'd added to my notes tab as Master During had progressed through his lecture. I was amazed at what gifts our interfaces were. I wondered what life might be like without them. Not worth living, I'm sure. With the key in hand, I hustled back down the hall, down the staircase, through the library to its back doors, then into the open field where my fellow students gathered. 4 wooden posts with a pair of crossbeams stood there like the scarecrows in our fields back home. Why would they have those? The bases of the objects disappeared into the grassy soil. I focused on one. Training target. These solid oak targets are used for combat training. Slits in the middle allow them to spin when the arms are struck. Shabana appeared next to me and I cocked a chin toward one of the dummies. That's neat. They spin so when you strike them, the arms come back around and you can practice blocking. They must be great for coordination. She raised her shoulder in a half shrug. I've never used this kind. The ones at the Foundation barracks are stationary. Mayhap I'll mention them to our Master-at-Arms. If they function like you suggest, I'm sure he'd find them useful for solo practice. Loud clicks and clacks brought my head around, and I spied Elrin and Johin striking the high arms of the targets. I squinted to focus. Elrin struck fiercely at one arm, then it spun in a blur. In response, Johin clutched his staff vertically and swung it across his body so the wooden beam struck between his hands and recoiled.
You have not been given permission to strike those targets,
a voice bellowed from behind the onlookers. Master Joran Renard pushed through the students.
Pardon me.
Then he approached the boys. He gazed at each of them in turn.
Join your classmates.
Although Elrin's expression didn't change, Johin sneered when his back was turned to the instructor. Our eyes met for the briefest glimpse. I tapped the key in the pocket of my robe.
Welcome back to constitutional development.
The lanky elf's hand settled on his hips, and the way he talked with absolutely no use of them struck me as strange. Most of the people I'd experienced since leaving the farm used their hands for emphasis, but neither he nor the one who'd brought me the candle, Prince Giles, had. A memory of Brunk's constant hand movements to accentuate the grunts that passed for the common tongue brought a brief smile to my lips. Master Renard's hand swung out.
Everyone will run 6 laps to warm up. The sooner you get started, the sooner we can proceed. Secure your weapons and move.
After collective sighs, we set off. Shabana passed up the opportunity to jog with our professor, instead limiting her pace and striding next to me. Elrin and Johin jogged beside us, but she waved them forward. Keep moving. You cannot intimidate us. Elrin shot her a toothy smile, then jogged ahead. Johin jogged closer.
When you return my key, perhaps we'll leave you be.
Perhaps, I growled. He spoke easily, his breathing steady as he ran.
There are no guarantees in this life, and everyone could see from day one that you're trouble. You think I don't know why I shiver when I'm close to you?
He jogged next to me, awaiting a response, but I adopted a stony gaze and jogged on.
If you want me to keep your little secret, you'll return the key.
I'd about had enough of his bullying. Your key will do you little good since they've cleared out the study.
Study?
His head cocked back as he ran.
Why do you call it a study?
Could it be words of the tomes and scrolls hadn't reached him? For what other purpose could he want the key if he wasn't aware of the contents? If Master Welling was the true owner, did that mean Johin had stolen it? Tell me, if Master Welling owns this key, how did you come to possess it? The gaunt boy who'd introduced himself as Harbin jogged past. He cast me a warning glance, then continued on, although I could see he strained with the effort by the way his chest rose and fell. Johin's lips pinched into a tight white line. When he spoke, his words came in a low grumble.
That's none of your concern, farm girl. Unless you want your secret shadow affinity getting out and increasing the suspicion already surrounding you, you will return the key. Continue to play games with me, and I'll make you wish you left the academy. Perhaps I'll have you expelled.
Your delusions are remarkable. I sprinted ahead, the key thumping against my hip. Shabana kept pace as easily as I expected. When Johan jogged forward, we sped up until the three of us passed Elrin in a full-on sprint. My stamina bar dipped 10% in just a few heartbeats, but I wasn't about to slow my pace. Moments later, the master lapped us. He cast a suspicious glance back at Johan, then me, but continued forward without a word. The elven student I'd noted running with him before carried her pace to match his. When my stamina dropped to 20% and the yellow bar blinked red, I slowed my jog. Johan dropped back and jogged next to Elrin. His gaze burned into the back of my sweating neck, but I didn't venture a glance. Intimidation was the man-boy's default, and I'd had enough of it. Master Joran called us toward the training targets. We formed a semicircle around him. Most clutched their knees with their hands. He scanned the crowd.
Breathe deeply. So many of you are in such poor condition you couldn't run across a battlefield, much less fight. Maintaining your stamina is imperative to your survival in conflict, and you never know when one of Rubal's dangers will rise to challenge you. We live in tumultuous times, class, and building up your stamina takes time and effort. So, today, you'll learn how to fight when you're tired.
He twisted to gesture at the dummies lined up near the shed.
5 combat targets stand before you. Much like Elrin and Johin, you will team up in pairs and strike them together.
He slipped the staff off his back and went to one of the dummies.
Miss Shen, will you assist me?
Yes, Master Renard. The elven woman with the tight blonde braids jogged toward him, unsheathing her staff in an easy motion while striding. She stood with her back rod straight as she faced the opposite side of the target. Master Renard struck the upper arm.
First you strike high, then your partner blocks the arm while you strike low.
He swung at the low arm and Shen blocked the high arm. She brought her staff toward her as she made contact so the arm came to a dead stop.
Your partner will block the lower arm, bring it to a stop, and you will attack the upper arm in the opposite direction.
She stopped the low arm with the section of staff beneath her bottom hand while he struck the top again.
Repeat until you gain an attribute or skill point of any kind, then step out and let someone take your place. At that time, your partner will switch from attacking to blocking. Any questions?
When none came, he waved an open hand toward the row of targets.
Pick your own partner, then line up in pairs.
Shabana gripped my hand and dragged me toward one of the targets. Let's get it done. You will gain more stamina if you work while you're tired. Trust me. Although my chest still rose and fell desperately as I gulped shallow breaths of air, I followed her lead. She struck the top arm, then I brought my staff up in a two-handed grip and made contact. But when my weapon struck wood, the pole shimmied and slowly spun back toward my partner. Master Renard stepped forward and shooed me to the side. Then he stopped the lower arm Shabana had struck.
You must bring the weapon toward yourself to allow for recoil. Although it seems counterintuitive, pivoting your body out of the way of an attack is much more effective than trying to block a stronger opponent's.
He nodded toward Shabana and she struck the top pole. It swung around. Then the elf stepped to the side and gave a little as the arm came around. It came to an almost dead stop. He repeated on the lower arm by sliding the staff down in his grip, planting it in the grass, then leaning it slightly to one side. Although the lower arm shimmied, it recoiled less.
It's not a perfect art, but we're trying to build your stamina and dexterity. If you're lucky, you'll even receive a point of strength now and again.
He stepped back, then I resumed my place. We swung, high, then low, over and again. I failed to bring the arm to a stop, but the instructor spoke words of encouragement. Soon, the higher arm stopped as intended. Then I focused on the strange coordination required for me to repeat it on the lower arm. A white light glowed through my pores and a system message appeared. I expected to see a stamina increase, but was pleasantly surprised instead. Your dexterity attribute has been increased by 1. Your dexterity attribute has increased to rank 4. Your dodge chance has increased to 1.5%.
Very nice, Contessa of Milbury. Now step away and let someone else have your position.
I slipped away, giddy with the excitement that washed over me. But the sensation cooled when Johin stepped past me and lined up on the other side of the target. I shot a warning glance at Shabana, but I didn't know why. She shrugged it off, and after I'd seen her swinging the staff in dual combat with me, I understood why. Shabana could take care of herself. The two beat at the dummy in slow, steady motions, with Johin acting as striker and Shabana blocking. The arm recoiled as it had with me, but she quickly adapted. Soon she was bringing the pulse to a dead stop, both high and low. Johin steadied his pace, striking high and low, faster and faster.
Come on, keep up.
I sneered. Shabana blocked high, then thrust her staff down to block the lower arm. The pace was now frenetic, and bringing it to a stop proved impossible. She grunted and sweat poured from her forehead. Although I hadn't considered it before, the high stamina evident by the way she ran so easily and fast could make it more difficult for her to gain an attribute or stamina rank. But I took solace in how her breath still came long and deep. Master Renard stepped in.
Stop.
The two stood straight.
You will not learn proper form by rushing through the exercise. Mr. Tur, slow your attacks. Be purposeful.
He shot Johin a warning glare.
Unless there's something going on here that requires mediation, then we can meet after class and run some more. Do either of you desire that outcome?
He glanced between them, but I knew his words were directed at the attacker. Shabana had done nothing wrong.
Good. Now practice.
Johin slammed the arm of the target with the high end of his staff, then swung low. Shabana blocked both, then her flesh flashed. The master pointed toward the line of waiting students and the Michonne exited, casting a final glare at her training partner. More than an hour later, the last person in the class received an upgrade. Then the master told us to form a wide circle so the fingertips of our outstretched arms could touch the shoulder of the person beside us.
Now that you've warmed up, it's time to apply what you've learned.
Warmed up? Mouthed Shabana. Her shoulders jostled with a silent giggle. The collective sound this time came as a groan, and Master Renard smiled.
If you're discouraged, we must be doing it right. I have created a list of students so I can pick your pairings at random.
His eyes shot left and right as he read his interface. I leaned toward Shabana. You can do that in your mind window? Shabana rolled her eyes. My goodness, I forget how little you know. I'm not sure I like the way you delivered those words. Sorry, I'll show you later. Whether by fate or folly, Master Renard chose Elrin Zen and me to pair up first. He stepped into the center of the circle, then turned his gaze on me. A smile swept across his features as he lowered his chin and stared up at me from just beneath his eyebrows. Then the smile vanished as quickly as it had come. Elrin Zen spun his staff over his hand, swept it behind his back as it twirled in a blur, then completed the motion with rolls over the opposite hand. Then the staff stopped dead across his chest. I recognized the way he rolled his staff with easy motions as an attempt at intimidation, and if I had to admit its effect out loud, I would have been embarrassed. But I refused to show it. I slid my staff out of its sheath and struggled to keep it from trembling. Master Renard stood equidistant from us off to one side.
The rules are as follows. You will swing your weapons in the same manner as when you practiced on the targets. You may attack either shoulder and either knee, and you can do so in any order. As we learn new strikes, they will be incorporated into your practice. For now, focus on what your muscles remember. You may forfeit at any time, and anyone breaking the rules and using unsanctioned strikes will be forced to forfeit.
I analyzed Elrin Zen with successive winks. Elrin Zen, Level 7 Human, no class selected. Melee Power Rating 13, Melee Defense Rating 11, Ranged Power Rating 2, Ranged Defense Rating 7, Magic Power Rating 3, Magic Defense Rating 7. The numbers might as well have been high-level elven runes for what little practical knowledge I could decipher. Without a fair source of comparison, they'd remain a mystery to me. Since my stats didn't appear the same as the ones I saw when I analyzed others, I was left confused. But then the realization occurred that anything I'd tried to do in arranging my interface to my liking had worked so far, so I conjured a thought as I stared at my own stats. Convert. My stats converted instantly shifted from Strength 14, Dexterity 4, Intelligence 6, Wisdom 4 plus 2, Constitution 20, Charisma 6, to Melee Power Rating 18, Melee Defense Rating 8, Ranged Power Rating 2, Ranged Defense Rating 3, Magic Power Rating 19, Magic Defense Rating 23. I scanned the comparison in a hurry. I was likely the stronger of us, but we wielded staves, and that might not be as helpful when he started twirling his too fast for me to follow. My magic power and magic defense ratings forced me to suppress an eyelid's flare. Why were they so much higher than his? The answer came as quickly as the question. Your affinity. remember how surprised Roshan and Master Welling were by your potential as well. I didn't have time to figure out how my defense rating applied, and the rest of the stats were equally confusing without adequate time to analyze them in a quiet room. But what I could do was compare them to his, then try to use what knowledge that lent to fight him off. Our elven master dipped his chin.
Elrin, you may offer the challenge.
Elrin Zen has challenged you to a duel. Do you accept? Yes? No? I was about to focus on yes when another message appeared on parchment to the side. You are being offered a quest. Defeat Elrin. Win a duel against Elrin Zen. Reward, 1000 XP. You will be awarded a runic scroll that will allow you to learn a random class agnostic spell. Do you accept this quest? Yes? No? A spell? Free magic? I paused, considering both questions in my interface. Before I accepted either, I set the little bar filled with red liquid representing my health on the top left side of my interface. Then I detached my stat window, became pleasantly surprised when I learned I could shrink it with the simple thought, and pushed it beneath the meter. I added my remaining health at the bottom so I could track it in real time. Constitution, 20. Hit points, 232. After that, I accepted the duel. Circles of orange light painted the ground beneath our feet, just like when I dueled Shabana days before. I accepted the quest. When I matched my gaze with Elrin's, there was no sign of the smile he'd worn before. His jaw ticked, indicating he clenched his back teeth. Before I could set my weight onto my back foot, he engaged. His hands clutched his weapon about a foot apart near the center. He stepped to the side and began pacing around me, his eyes locked on mine. I struggled to match his gaze, and the unnatural movement made me aware he wanted to put me off kilter, set me on my back foot. After a revolution, I stopped turning and stepped to the side to block his path. Elrin's staff came around in a blur and struck my right shoulder before I had time to respond. Pain erupted up the side of my neck as I thrusted my own weapon in my defense and whiffed the air. Elrin strikes with his acolyte staff. Hit, -11 HP, 221 HP remaining. The next strike whipped around from the other end of his weapon, but when I went to protect that shoulder, it swept low and struck the side of my knee with a hollow clank. I cried out and hopped on the other leg, but when he came around for another strike on the opposite side, his shoulder dipped, telegraphing a low strike. I leapt into the air and his weapon passed under me. When I landed, the knee he'd struck throbbed. Out of instinct to protect that side, I brought my staff around and popped Elrin in the shoulder before he could raise his staff from its errant path to defend himself. It clanked against a bone atop his shoulder, then his arm went limp. You strike Elrin with your acolyte staff. Elrin Zen, -11 HP, 229 HP remaining. Your staff skill has reached rank 11. In our previous class, I'd come to understand the first point of Constitution equated to 80 HP, and each additional point added 8. If my Constitution was 20 and that awarded me 232 HP, and I struck to remove 11 of Elrin's, leaving him with 229, my interface answered the calculation no sooner than the thought had traversed my brain space. The answer is 21. So, now I knew Elrin Zen's Constitution was 1 point higher than mine. And although I'd wondered what he'd done to earn it, the blur of his staff coming around for another strike sent the thoughts packing. Knowing I'd never ducked the blow, I rolled to the ground. Although I'd intended to let my momentum bring me back to my feet, I was anything but practiced in the tumbling arts and soon found myself on my duff. Elrin pressed his advantage. Charging to stand over me, he whipped the staff around. Out of pure luck, I thrust out my own and blocked the shoulder shot while wondering why our instructor hadn't stopped the exercise since I was no longer on my feet. I brought my staff around with all the might I could muster from the ground, and a hollow thunk sounded when it made impact with the side of Elrin's knee. He lost 14 HP, and I realized I'd done more damage than with my previous attack. Note to self, knees are good. When he dipped to favor the knee, I brought the other side of my staff around and struck the other. 9 more HP. Elrin retreated, limping backward. I used the respite to gain my feet, then pursued. A heat rose in my neck as I pressed a flurry of attacks, planning to use any melee power advantaged against him and have this done. I struck a shoulder with a short swing. You strike Elrin with your acolyte staff. Elrin Zen, -15 HP, 214 HP remaining. Your staff skill has reached rank 12. I recovered 4 HP as I pressed forward, striking high on one side, low on the other. Elrin's eyes widened with focus, and he blocked the incoming strikes, but I considered every step he took backward a victory. The heat in my neck bloomed. I half swung my staff, and when he drew his to block, I reversed the attack and hit him hard in one knee. You strike Elrin with your acolyte's staff. Elrin Zen, -11 HP, 203 HP remaining. You have learned a new combat skill, Feint. Fake an attack in one direction to draw your enemy's defense, then reverse the motion and strike for 1.5 times normal damage. Chance of critical hit increased by 2% when successfully using Feint. Your staff skill has reached rank 13. I barely had time to scan the message if I wanted to press my advantage further, and I'd just become aware of a sudden surge of hot energy flowing through my arms with each successive swing. It burned bright in me, and my attacks became smoother yet more violent. Elrin blocked desperately, fighting me off, until he reached the line of students behind him and had nowhere to run. He slipped to one side, but I stepped to block him. Shock arrested his face as I brought my staff back and swung with all my might. But when that end of my weapon rose into my view, a glowing red tracer followed its arc across the air. When Elrin blocked, it flashed. Your staff skill has reached rank 14. Your staff skill has reached rank 15. Your staff skill has reached rank 16.
What the?
He twisted, leveled his weapon over one shoulder, then slammed the tip into the bridge of my nose. A bright white flash accompanied a warm gush of crimson streaming down my face. I reeled, then folded to the ground. The heat rushed from my arms, leaving a chill in its wake. Then a violent shiver erupted at the base of my spine and crept to my neck, sending a shockwave of electric tendrils across my back.
Halt!
Master Renard called. He adopted a level tone.
Mr. Zen, you will forfeit the duel. But she cheated. She used magic. Tess used the approved strikes throughout the conflict. You used one I haven't allowed. Staff punches are illegal. You will forfeit.
The bridge of my nose shrieked in persistent spasms as blood flowed through my fingers. Master Renard gripped my bicep, then effortlessly hauled me to my feet. My eyes blinked involuntary tears, and his blurry features appeared before me as he pulled me close, then reached for my hand. I resisted at first, then let him move it so he could assess the damage.
Tess, you've completed class for the day and are excused.
Elrin Zen has forfeited your duel. You have completed a quest. Defeat Elrin. Win duel against Elrin Zen. Reward 1,000 XP. A golden flash of light surrounded me, then funneled into the sky. A matching number 6 exploded into view before my eyes, then zipped into the distance until it shrank to nothing. Congratulations. You have reached level 6. Since you have not chosen a class, your attribute points are assigned to Constitution. +2 Constitution. You are awarded 1 elective attribute point. You have 5 elective points to spend. You must visit an attributes trainer to spend these attribute points. You have learned. The pain in my nose ceased, leaving only ghosts of the torment behind. Then the wounds sewed together in a split second. I pulled out my exercise shirt and peered down only to find sweat and no trace of the blood that should have pooled there. I wondered if my clothing lacked the remnants because I'd leveled or because the injury had been sustained in a duel. I suspected the latter. Shabana grabbed my arm. You leveled! You saw it? We are still in the party. Besides, when you're in a town, everyone can see. I peered over my shoulder to find the whole class lined up, staring back at me, 1 or 2 pointing. Guess I don't need to go see Rashan. Johan and Elrin stood near the back of the group, and although I couldn't make out their expressions at this distance, the low way their heads hung so as to hide their faces spoke volumes. Even with my limited exposure to people when I lived on the farm, I could read their expressions, and they didn't reflect dejection. Anger flowed through their veins, and I would have to watch my back like never before. Shabana followed my gaze. What was with your staff glowing like that? I have no idea. She stared at me until I brought my head around and matched her gaze. The straight line of her lips seemed foreign on her face when compared to their natural upward tilt at the corners. Shabana glanced back at the crowd, but I knew her focus had gone to the same subjects I'd watched a moment earlier. Something tells me you'd better figure it out. She pressed the back of one hand to my face. You're burning up again.